So we're live. No, I mean like it's pre-stream. They can't hear us or anything. I got you guys. You did that. Okay, good. No, during the debate we'll do that, yeah.
So I'm here at school in the UK. So my
It's all yours, SFT.
Yeah, I have two. Oh, sorry.
Awesome. Thanks so much there. Praise. We are live tonight on Standing for Truth, and we have a real treat for everybody. This is the much anticipated debate between Bill Morgan and Erika, aka Gutsick Gibbon. Did I say that right?
You did. You nailed it.
Good, good. Before we get started, though, I want to thank the debaters for giving us their time for this very exciting debate. Both Erika and Bill, of course, are no stranger to debates, nor are they strangers to this topic. So this is going to be a lot of fun. I'd also like to thank Praise here for giving us his technical support, as well as Dapper Dino here for co-moderating this debate. Did you have something to say, Dapper Dino?
I just wanted to say hi to everybody. You know, it's nice to see we got a pretty good audience already, and we barely even started.
Very nice.
So that's exciting. I have a channel. I do some science stuff. I do some. I talk about some creationist stuff. I do pretty much weekly live streams that are just a hangout. I try to keep my content PG-13. The weekly hangouts can get a little bit veering a little closer to R, so you know, be prepared for that if you come on Tuesday. But yeah, and I've talked with Erika a number of times. Bill, I think we might have had a couple emails or something. I've had a few emails with SFT. We've talked in chats a bunch. And I'm just here to make sure that everything, one, stays civil, and two, one of my things is that people answer questions that are asked. So like I was saying earlier to Erika, if she goes off topic, I'm gonna bring her back on topic.
and go off topic, I will. I'm sure that'll happen. You gotta bust me for it when it happens.
Okay.
It's like we were saying in the pre-show. If Bill wants to know where his tail went, Erika, you better answer that question.
Exactly.
I know. Believe me. That's and I'm going to be bringing foot morphology into it because that's my wheelhouse.
That's why this is going to be a lot of fun. So Dapper Dino, thanks so much for that introduction. Once again, thanks for co-moderating. So we're going to go over the format real quick before we do introduction. So we're looking at 12-minute opening statements, followed by a 6-minute rebuttal from each of the debaters, of course. Then a 40-minute discussion. Quick closings, we'll give them about 5 minutes, and then a question and answer period. So for everybody in the audience, please tag either myself or Dapper Dino with your questions. We'll save them. Super chats, of course, are going to be read first, and then the questions after. So let's start off with some brief introductions from the debaters. Tell us about yourselves. In order for, not only us, but also the audience can get to know a little bit more about Bill and Erika before the battle begins. Just kidding. We're going to keep this fun, profitable, and respectful. So go ahead, Bill.
Well, first, it's not a battle. It's two people seeking truth. And my name is Bill Morgan. I've been an engineer for 37 years, doing a lot of design work for the Navy, battleships, nuclear submarines, all kinds of fun things like that. And I'm a former atheist. I truly believed atheism and the theory of evolution was true until my late 20s. And scientific evidence brought me out of that. And I enjoy talking with people, and I respect everyone, and think that most people are seeking the truth.
Awesome. I appreciate that, Bill. Once again, thanks for giving us your time for this debate too, Bill. And Erika, on to you.
Yes, I think that's a great way of putting it. I mean, really and truly, that's all we're after, is figuring out the means by which our world works. So I'm Erika. I go by Gutsick Gibbon on YouTube, or just Erika. That's actually what most people have just started calling me, which is fine. I got my BSA in animal science, and I picked up a minor in biology and one in anthropology as well. I'm currently pursuing my master's of research in primatology. So that's my deal. I like monkeys.
Well, thanks so much, Erika. Looks like the audience is really looking forward to this debate, and so am I. So let's get started. I've got 12-minute openings. We're going to start with Bill. Bill, I'm not going to start on your first word. Don't worry. I'll wait till your screen is shared. And when you're good to go, I'll start the clock.
Okay. I clicked share.
We got something going on.
All right. Us old guys are not great with computers. All right. Let me get my clock here.
And if you want to get that little strip out of the way, just hit hide. So you don't have to have that little strip there.
You kind of like
that? Yep.
Okay, great. All right. Here we go. Creation versus evolution. It's a search for the truth. A good question is, how did we get here? What is the best explanation of how humans got here? Well, we either got here by design, which means by plan, or by chance, unplanned. This is a picture of my favorite actor, Peter Falk. He played Columbo in the 70s, a very popular TV show. Well, Columbo had a false eye, a glass eye, and a human eye. So, polite question for Erika. Which eye would you say is the result of design? Would you say his glass eye is the result of design? Would you say his human eye that could see with an optic nerve and a visual cortex is the result of design? Are they both designs, or are neither one designs? I look forward to your answer on that. Now, I strongly believe that God does not make things. God makes systems. Systems exist of many, many components, which are really subsystems. I'd like to explain. Evolution cannot make living systems, okay? So vision is a system. It's not a thing. For vision to work, what components do you need? You need eyes, optic nerves, visual cortex, and many other things. So a question for Erika. If evolution, which is a step-by-step process, resulted in vision, what evolved first? Was it the eye, the visual cortex, or the optic nerve? Or for vision to work, did they all appear at the same time? Now, the Blue Man engineer thinks they all were created and designed at the same time. For the system to work, all the components need to work. Systems can't evolve. Systems in living things cannot come by a step-by-step process. Eyes are also systems. Which part of the eye evolved first? The cornea, retina, iris, lens, retina, rods, cones. The more you look at the details of the systems, to me, the impossibility of the theory of evolution. This is not something that results in a step-by-step process. I've done over 400 designs in my career, and the whole system doesn't work until all the components of the system work. Same thing with eyes. Or did they all appear at the same time, which I think is logical and scientific. For vision to work, we need our body systems to work. We have 10 body systems. Which body system evolved first for humans? The nervous, the digestive, cardiovascular, respiratory? Humans, living humans, cannot get here by a step-by-step process. That's blind faith. That's fantasy. So a question I ask politely to Erika is, which body system evolved first? Our digestive, reproductive, skeletal? I believe they all have to appear at the same time. And then don't forget, for sexual reproduction, you need male and female. How in the world does that evolve by a step-by-step process? Can we be 100% certain something is the result of design? Suppose you come home from work, you see this on your driveway, 15 stones in that pattern. You'd probably think that pattern got there by chance. Suppose you come home the next day, you see this, 6 stones in a straight line. You'd say that probably happened by design. Now, you cannot be 100% sure it's a design because you weren't there. You could be 99% sure that's a design. Suppose you come home from work, you see this on your driveway. Now you know somebody's messing with you, but you cannot be 100% sure it's a design because you weren't there. You did not see the designer make it. But to get to 100%, I'd say you're 99.999% sure it's a design, but you've got a little bit of faith. It is not blind faith to believe that's a design. So my next question is, what's more complex, 150 stones in a circle or the human eye? I cannot say I'm 100% sure eyes are the result of design, but I got a whole heck of a lot of 9s up there and just a little bit of faith. The more functional, the more complex something gets, the less faith it takes to require it's a design. And I believe people who believe in chance have much, much more faith than the design people. Creationists believe there's a designer that possesses an IQ of infinity. The designer of the eye, the optic nerve, the visual cortex has an IQ that I can't even imagine. Evolutionists often think that nature made everything. Well, what's the IQ of nature? It's 0. So we have to decide, do we think eyes are the result of an IQ of infinity or an IQ of 0? The scientific process, the most important part of science is observation, but there's steps. The first step of science is an idea. Suppose I have an idea that pens can fly. I drop the pen 8 billion times. Every time it doesn't fly, I tested my idea and I observed that pens don't seem to fly. My conclusion should be pens don't fly. Suppose I have the idea that humans have ape-like ancestors. The next step is to do observations and reach your conclusion from observations. So there are 8 billion people on Earth. What do we observe? They all have human parents, human grandparents, human great-great-parents. Far back as you can go, nothing but humans. Mitochondrial DNA says nothing but human ancestors for the 8 billion people on our Earth. There's about 1 million apes. Isn't that a cool picture? About 1 million apes on Earth. What do we know? Ape parents, ape grandparents. When they make a baby, they make apes. This is observation. This is science. How many ape men exist? 0. No transitional forms. Now you can say, well, that guy's just a biased creationist. I love to read evolutionist literature. This is from an evolutionist. Scientists have been on the trail of the last common ancestor for decades, and they still have not found it. There's the link at the bottom. But because there is so little agreement on what the LCA should look like, researchers will interpret the fossils differently. The evolutionists admit there are no transitional forms. If it's not observed, it's not science. The key to science is observation. When evolutionists admit there's no observed ape men, the theory of evolution is anti-science. It's complete faith. So where is the evidence? Where are the transitional forms for ape men to men? Well, evolutionists might say the missing links are in the fossils. Let's talk about fossils. The fossils can tell us good information. Bats show up suddenly in the fossil record, but they're unchanged for 52 million years. Ants show up suddenly in the fossil record. They're unchanged for 99 million years. This could be a problem for evolutionists. Frogs show up suddenly in the fossil record and remain unchanged for 120 million years. This frog had a salamander in its belly. Isn't that cool? Salamanders show up suddenly in the fossil record and remain unchanged for 120 million years. This guy was the winner. He had frog bones in his gut. Feathers show up suddenly in the fossil record, unchanged for 150 million years. I think you guys are getting the point. Snakes show up suddenly in the fossil record, unchanged for 150 million years. Where is the evolution? Maple leaves show up suddenly in the fossil record, not the Toronto Maple Leafs, and remain unchanged for 270 million years. That's a long time of no change. Dragonflies show up suddenly, unchanged for 300 million years. Look at the beauty of that thing. Horseshoe crabs show up suddenly in the fossil record, 450 million years, unchanged. Where is the observational evidence for the theory of evolution? Now buckle your seatbelts for this one. Cyanobacteria shows up suddenly in the fossil record, 3.5 billion years, no change. On a side topic, how in the world could it last 3.5 billion years and not erode? That might come up later. But the fossils tell us something. They're not evolving. They're showing up 100% designed, similar to today's with no change. It's called sudden appearance. Boom, all of a sudden you got a sudden bat, a sudden ant, and stasis. It's not changing. Observational science falsifies the theory of evolution. And I always tell people, decide for yourself, Google living fossils. There's all kinds of articles on living fossils. Another question I hope Erika will address. How did matter and energy originate? How did we get here? What is your best explanation? Now, the first law of thermodynamics, a law of science, teaches matter and energy is neither created nor destroyed. So again, I politely ask Erika, do you think matter and energy originated from nothing by natural means, or do you think it's eternal? You've got science problems with either answer. Laws of science and observation on matter and energy support creation and falsify atheism. Oh, and I'd like to say I have no idea if Erika's an atheist or not, so I'm not putting words in her mouth. How did life originate? What's your best explanation? The law of biogenesis and the cell theory teach life can only come from life. Once again, a law of science supports creation and falsifies atheism. Now, evolutionists will often say, well, the questions of the origin of the universe or the origin of life is not addressed by evolution. Well, that's like saying, let's talk about baseball, but evolutionists only want to talk about the 9th inning. Why is that? Because they're smart. They cannot explain the origin of matter, energy, and life. They'd rather ignore it and avoid it. But science should seek truth and answer all questions. Creationists love to talk about the whole game. We love to talk about the origin of matter, energy, and life. My life story, real quick. I was raised going to church and all that, read the Bible. When I was 14, my biology teacher taught that we had ape-like ancestors. I love biology. I love science. And I said, well, that's cool. Well, the Bible's wrong. I'm not going to believe it or read it anymore. What are these? Very important. These are cartoon drawings. That is not scientific evidence. I propose the theory of evolution are drawings and stories, not empirical evidence. The schools will teach this, but they don't teach the kids what the actual fossils are, the details on the fossils. When I learned the details of the fossils, I dug into it. And the more I dug into it, the stronger the creationist I became. Question of the day. Why do textbooks only have drawings as evidence for evolution and not photographs? Well, we both know the answer. There's nothing to photograph. Quiz time. The theory of evolution believes all life is related. Here's humans. Evolutionists believe humans are related to apes, that we're related to pine trees, that we're related to mushrooms, and we're related to bacteria. I don't believe this. Erika, polite question. Do you really believe that pine trees are your relatives? Yes or no? I believe apes make apes, people make people, bacteria makes bacteria, and pine trees make pine trees. That's not religious. That's genetics and biochemistry. DNA is a nightmare for the evolutionist and atheist and a creationist best friend. Natural selection. Suppose you had two dogs, a furry dog and a hairless dog. You took them to Alaska and you left them there. It got cold.
Oh, sorry, Bill. Sorry. We just got about 15 seconds left. Sorry.
Okay. Natural selection is true, but dogs can only make dogs, but they lose traits. Dogs can only make dogs. Evolution is true. There's variation. Microevolution, 100% true. You can breed dogs, but they're only going to make dogs. Microevolution does not prove macro of bacteria to blue whale. But can bacteria mutate? Absolutely. It's still bacteria. So, final slide. Questions for Erika. Do you think the eyes of Peter Falk are designed? Which ones? Is vision the result of design or chance? Do you think systems in the human bodies can evolve by a step-by-step process? Which one evolved first? Do you believe evolution because you've seen evidence with it for your eyes? Or do you believe it because you've only heard that it's true? How did matter and energy originate? How did life originate? And do you agree that genetics shows people make people and apes make apes? Okay? And everybody's goal, is your goal truth? Or is your goal trying to prove what you want to be true? And if I ran over a little bit, I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you
so much for your presentation, Bill. Bill went about 13 minutes. So Erika, take your time. Take as much time as you need.
Problem. I should be about, like I said, 12 minutes, give or take, but sometimes I get on a roll. So, and just so you know, Bill, I hope I answer at least some of your questions in my presentation, but I know I won't answer all of them just because, it's an opening statement. So I didn't anticipate what questions you were specifically going to have. So we can save those sort of for the discussion. And I wrote down as many of them as I could, but if I've forgotten any, you'll just have to remind me.
No problem. We're two pals trying to find the truth.
Absolutely. Okay, let me share my screen here. So
how do I see her screen? Sorry about this.
I don't know.
You should see it once. If she's, is that your screen there, Bill?
I see my screen.
So if you click stop share, then, I think Bill might have just.
That might be me. All right, can you guys see my screen? Evolutionary.
I'm not sure Bill is here though.
Yes, we can see yours. Bill jumped. Bill, you scared us. He's leaving us in suspense. But you're back. Cool. Everything's good. Bill, just make sure you can see Erika's screen there.
All right.
Can you see it? All I see is my slides.
Don't see mine? Can everybody else see mine?
I can see. Bill, do you have the tab with the StreamYard?
Oh, there it is.
StreamYard. Okay, there you go.
Wait. StreamYard, evolutionary theory.
All right, everybody can see that?
Yes, Erika, we can all see it. I'll set the timer for 13 minutes. Just take as much time as you need, and we'll have some fun. Go ahead.
Okay, so evolutionary theory. My name's Erika. I already gave you my credentials, and what I'm here to do today is make a case for evolutionary theory as the best explanation for the biodiversity of life that we see today. So, what is evolution? This is a slippery term, as Kent likes to say, so we really got to define it. So, evolution is change in the heritable characteristics of biological populations over successive generations. That's what I'm here to argue. What evolution is not is abiogenesis, that is to say, the origin of life itself, cosmic evolution, that is, the origin of stellar bodies, or dogs coming from non-dogs, which of course violates the law of monophily. I'm sure we've all heard that before. So, what support is there for evolution? Well, quite a bit. We see support from physics, morphology, paleontology, genetics, and ecology, including a myriad of other fields that I unfortunately don't quite have time to cover today. But let's start with physics. Radiometric dating, that gets thrown around a lot. And radiometric dating is sort of the act of dating the rocks that we find fossils in, or just the rocks themselves, to establish a timeline or geologic column. Now, radiometric dating is backed by a law of physics that is firm and known as the radioactive decay law. It additionally covers the nature of decay constants and half-lives and indicates that, to our current knowledge, I must emphasize this, decay rates do not change in meaningful ways in nature on our planet. In the lab, we can get it up to about a 1% increase in decay. And decay, when I say this, I essentially just mean the act of a parent nucleus decaying into an alpha particle and a daughter. So the rate group, which is a creationist group, understandably wasn't a big fan of this because dating, of course, gives the Earth about a 4.5 to 4.8 billion year time frame. So they essentially sought to disprove it, to find an exception. But they were discontinued in 2005 because, quote, they had to admit that a young Earth position cannot be reconciled with the scientific data without assuming that exotic solutions will be discovered in the future. No known thermodynamic process could account for the required rate of heat removal, nor is there any known way to protect organisms from radiation damage. That is to say, when you try to squeeze 4.8 billion years of radioactive decay into 6,000 years, you have a big problem. At the time of Adam and Eve, as far as a Tufts geologist's own math, about 6,000 years ago, the surface of the Earth would be 70,000 degrees Celsius for every square kilometer. And at the time of Jesus' birth, that geothermal gradient being very generous, we would be at about 400 degrees Celsius for every square kilometer. That's what happens if you try to indicate accelerated decay to explain what the rocks say. And there's a source at the bottom for that. But we can also look to morphology. I must emphasize this as well. Myself and everyone watching, we're all apes. That's whether we classify it by morphology, genetics, or looking just specifically at what we find in the fossil record. So, for instance, you have the same dental formula as that rhesus macaque at the bottom left. We all have split lips, those of us who are haplorine primates. Of the hominoids, we all have Y-shaped molar patterns, and similar to that orangutan who is using a spear to attempt to fish, as they had observed the local fishermen doing, we all use tools. Now, that's not to say that apes have to observe, the other apes have to observe to use tools, as we have seen a myriad of tool use in basically all of the ape species, including the gibbons to a much lesser degree, and even some platyrrhines. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about paleontology today, because that's not something I usually harp on quite a bit. And I know that Bill has emphasized quite a bit in his presentation that the fossils aren't there. I must heavily disagree. So look at these two individuals here. We have the common ancestor between humans and chimps on the left, and an anatomically modern human on the right. Obviously, there are a great amount of differences between the two, but evolutionary theory can make a hypothesis. If evolutionary theory is valid, we should find a gradient of traits trending from this common ancestor to anatomically modern human through geologic time. Morphologic change, geologic time. That's what we need. So can we show that? And the answer is yes, totally. What we see here is a myriad of different hominid skulls. That's just the skulls, excluding entirely all the postcrania that we have, which since basically the year 2000, it's just been building and building. Now, it might be hard to believe for some of you out there that A can essentially lead to N as a descendant on this page, but A to B, B to C, C to D, these populations are essentially begetting one another. And what we're seeing is small, incremental, morphologic change over time. That is to say, this is macroevolution, period. And we can look more closely at some of the individuals that we consider mosaics, like Lucy, Australopithecus afarensis, or Australopithecus africanus. So what we see here is look at the knees at the bottom right. We know Lucy walked on 2 feet because her knees were valgus in nature. Look at the inline big toe. How about the trend towards a parabolic palate that we can see from the Australopithecines to Neanderthals and Heidelbergensis? What about the way the foramen magnum moves more ventrally under the skull, or how the femoral head fits into the socket of the pelvis? This is all incredible stuff. You couldn't ask for a better mosaic. But there's more than just the hominids that we can look to. The tetrapods have an incredible representation in the fossil record, from true Sarcopterygian fish in Eusthenopteron all the way down to true tetrapods here at the bottom with Ichthyostega. Now, I know we said we don't like cartoons, but I do like this one on the bottom right. I think that paleoart is quite cute. But in the middle here, what we see, and if we had more time, I could go over it more in depth, is the emergence of wrist bones, digits, the ulna, the radius, the differentiation of the pectoral muscles on the chest, a neck, the eyes moving to the top of the skull. This is irrefutable stuff. And what is it? It's morphologic change through geologic time. Same thing with the mammals. We start to see heterodontic teeth merging in these organisms. We see pitting at the edge of the rostral end of the snout where nerve bundles would fit, which has only been seen in animals with whiskers. We see the legs moving underneath the body, which is a mammalian trait, not a reptilian one, or rather a synapsid one. So what do we see? Synapsid in pelycosaurs, and then therapsids, cynodonts, and mammals. These traits are all emerging slowly through geologic time. What about, oh, I forgot about this one. This is really cool too. So this is a comparison of a modern agama lizard, which is the dragon listed there, a fossil mammal relative known as Thrinaxodon, a newborn kangaroo rat, and an adult kangaroo rat. What do we see? We see the movement of the auditory ossicles, that is the bones that make up the inner ear, mimicked in this Evo-Devo down at the bottom. What does the newborn kangaroo rat's jaw look more like? Its adult form or the fossil mammal relative? Well, it's somewhat intermediate, is it not? This is fascinating stuff. Birds, same thing. I really hope Bill isn't the kind of guy that doesn't think that dinosaurs have feathers, because that's getting to be a very hard position to hold, with Bapiosaurus down at the bottom, Archaeopteryx, Rahanavis, we've got Microraptor, just an absolute myriad of dinosaurs that have feathers, but not just that, emerging bird traits. We have hollow bones, the semi-lunate carpal. This is morphologic change across geologic time, until eventually all we have are the birds that exist around us today. What about whales? Same situation. Modern cetaceans have an auditory structure that's unique just to them. No other organism living on the planet today has it. It's called the involucrum. But guess what? In the fossil record, we find numerous terrestrial mammals, all of which lived on the coast, that along with acquiring these semi-aquatic morphologic traits, they still keep that involucrum. That is what suggests that whales evolved from terrestrial mammals. But not just that, the knees of Eocene whales look like those of the modern pronghorn antelope. So what is this? It's morphologic change through geologic time. But we can talk about genetics too. Genomic comparison is a great way to find out how related one individual is from another. And when we compare the genomes of humans and genus Pan, that is the chimps and the bonobos, we find that they're 98.8% similar as far as coding base pairs go. Now that's from an article in 2003 for that coding base pair similarity, but another article from 2012 listed here at the top at the bottom not only confirms that, but tells us that chimps and bonobos are more closely related to us with regard to their entire genome than they are to the other apes. That means their genomic similarity looks more like a human's than a gorilla's. And this is basically just a souped up version of a paternity test. So if you're going to throw that out the window, that similarity, you have a lot of courts to call. And of course, fossils and DNA tests do indeed hold up in court. Let's talk about ecology, though. So to reiterate what many have said to me before, or have said before me, evolutionary theory does not suggest that individuals produce offspring unlike themselves. That would violate the law of monophily. Populations evolve, not individuals. But let's consider the fruit fly for a moment. This experiment done by Dodd et al. In 1989 showed us that when you separate a population of Drosophila and feed them different things, let 8 generations pass, and then put them back together, they won't mate with people or with individuals outside of their group. This is called reproductive isolation, and it's macroevolution. So you might be thinking, well, there's still flies. Yes, of course they are, because If they weren't, it would violate the law of monophyly and disprove evolution. You cannot outgrow your own ancestry. It wouldn't matter if those flies evolved into a 10-pound crab-looking organism with 12 legs. It would still belong to Drosophila as its genera. Let's talk about whales and pine trees. So as of right now, it's considered fairly consensus that we evolved, all whales share a common ancestor in a simple single-celled eukaryote, which was approximately 3.8 billion years ago. But it wasn't a plant or an animal. This, of course, doesn't violate the law of monophyly, because how could it? And what we see here is single cells of plant and animal that share an immense amount in common, as well as their colonial forms and as well as their conglomeration into multicellular organisms here in the flatworm and what I believe is a hornwort. We know that multicellularity can evolve because this was shown to happen in a lab under the pressures of predation in 2019. This is a really cool paper and it's got videos. I recommend checking it out. But what about today? Can any animals do this today outside of the lab? Yes, they can. Many species with short generation times, both within and outside of the lab, are constantly changing to their surroundings morphologically. Now, this is, whether we like it or not, if they can't interbreed anymore, or sometimes if they can, I will give that the definition of species can be quite wonky. But this is macroevolution. These cecal valves, at least according to P.Z. Meyer, are entirely novel. They didn't exist in the ancestral population. I would classify that as new information. But we can't observe this over millions of years. This is true. We can't. Instead, we can use data that we collect today to inform us on what happened in the past. After all, the rocks were there. This is still observation and it's still empirical. Other examples of using data obtained in the present by present observations to inform us about the past that are not as scrutinized as evolution by creationists include astronomy. We obtain data from neutron stars, black holes, and supernovae, which inform us of their properties, but we don't directly observe them with our eyeballs. Medicine, a pathogen is not always directly cultured, but doctors will treat it based off of the data they have, that is to say, the symptoms. Or geology. We don't watch plates move in real time, nor have we watched them move in the past, but we know that we can project that backwards and see what formations they used to be in. Creationists accept this. They accept Pangea by and large, at least many I know do, but they put it under a Noachian deluge lens. And so let's assess the data. Physics and geology tell us the Earth is very old, 4.8 billion years. Morphology and paleontology show a gradient of trait acquisition and loss through geologic time. Genetics confirms this by linking traits to genes and mapping the present genomes of present animals and plants. This allows us to estimate divergent and speciation times using mutation rates and molecular clocks. And ecology shows us that natural selection and mutation, of course, still occur and drive change in species as well as...
We've got about 25 seconds, Erika. Sorry.
No problem. I'm reading this last sentence and I'm done. All of these factors combined show us that evolution, the change of heritable characteristics of biological populations over successive generations, is the most parsimonious explanation for the diversity of life today. That's all I got.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for that opening presentation there, Erika.
You got to de-share my screen for me. I don't know how to do it.
Done.
Excellent.
Praise I am, it's on top of it.
He's on.
That's why we pay him the big bucks. You're getting a promotion, Praise. Okay, so thanks to both debaters for their opening presentations. We are now jumping into the rebuttal round. The rebuttal round is 6 minutes each. So we'll hand it over to you, Bill. Whenever you're ready, I'll start the clock.
Oh, okay, I'm not ready yet. Mine still says stop screen.
Oh, do you want to share some, Bill?
Yes.
Oh, okay, hold on.
I'm a sharing guy.
Nice.
Now for these rounds, I'll give a 1 minute warning. So once we reach the 5 minute mark, and then about a 15-second warning. But for the rebuttal rounds, I got to be pretty strict. It's 6 minutes and we're done.
Perfect.
Okay, let me write.
You're good to go.
All right, here I go. Good job, Erika. Very articulate. But I completely knew you were not going to address the origin of matter, origin of energy, and origin of life. Creationist means creation. We address everything. Could you explain to us why you will not explain that? Because it's part of the argument of how did we get here? Is that out of convenience or fear? But please share why you won't talk about the origin of matter, energy, and life. It's crucial to this argument. Now, you said it was irrefutable that evolution was true. Well, I disagree. Does it bother you that there's no living evidence? I presented 8 billion humans, 1 million apes, no living ape men. To me, that does not mean it's irrefutable. Billions of reptiles, millions of birds, no transitional forms. I politely propose the theory of evolution, once again, are stories and drawings. Have you seen the theory of evolution with your eyes, or you've only heard that it's true? There are no living evidence, and the fossils, as we showed, show stasis and sudden appearance. Okay, so here we go. DNA similarities, very good point. All of these organisms are made out of cells. These reproduce by meiosis. These are vertebrates. These have 4 limbs. These give birth to live young, but only humans do open heart surgery and drive-by shootings. We have much more in similar with apes. We eat the same food, breathe the same air, drink the same water. We have hair, we have blood. I would say it's natural that we have more similarities. That's the data. Your conclusion means we're related. I say no. We have similarities, but we're not related. And observational evidence is what supports that. Okay. Skeletons. We both love dogs. We cleared that up. You can do a lot of things with dogs. You can argue that one of these skeletons evolved into another one. One is predating the other one. They're skeletons of existing dogs that live today. The fossils can be interpreted many ways, and I showed the slide where evolutionists argue over the same data on fossils. These are skulls of 2 beautiful dogs, Doberman and a Bulldog. You can say one's primordial to the other, one evolved into another. No, they're both dogs with variation. All the skulls that you showed could easily be defined as being a part of an ape variation or a human variation. You talked about Lucy. I love Lucy. It was a great TV show. But anyways, let's start with the data. Lucy lived in Africa. Height, weight, everything was ape-like about Lucy, but it had the ability to walk on 2 legs and walk upright. This animal's alive today, bonobo. Not only can it stand on 2 legs, it can play air guitar. It can walk and do gardening. Apes today have the ability to walk on 2 legs. And guess where bonobo lives? In Africa. What a coincidence. I propose the fossils of upright walking ape-like animals were simply apes, and they're alive today. Apes that can walk upright. Reptile to bird evolution. Okay. Let's look at the science. This was a National Geographic article, confidence, a lot of details, fancy names, and the author of the article talked about it. But he had one small problem in his own article. No feathers were found with his supposed bird ancestor, and he came out and admitted it, and eventually it was found out to be a fraud. Okay, let's see, reptiles to birds. Oops, I'm sorry. Now, a lot of people say that birds are ancestors of reptiles. Where's the living evidence, Erika? Birds have wings, reptiles have legs. I can't even conceptualize how a leg becomes a wing. Reptiles have scales, birds have feathers. Where's the evidence? How does a scale evolve into a feather? Reptiles are cold-blooded. Birds are warm-blooded. How did this evolve? Reptiles have solid bones. Birds have hollow bones. Where's the evidence that this? Once again, the theory of evolution, to me, is stories and drawings. Reptiles have very poor eyesight. Birds have the best eyesight. These are just so stories that teaching that one evolved into another. You brought up whales. Oops, I'm sorry. Oops. Anyways, you brought up whales. Pardon that slide. When did they get their blubber? When did they lose their legs? When did their blowhole go to the top?
1 minute. 1 minute, Bill. Continue.
Okay, great. Let's just talk about the blubber. If they get the blubber on the land, they overheat. If they go in the water without it, they would have hypothermia and be cold. Did the blowhole change while it was on the land? whales are beautifully designed to live in the ocean, in the cold water. So anyways, once again, let's talk about the origin of matter and energy. Let's talk about the origin of life. Let's talk about living animals. You're a fine young lady with a good arguments, but let's deal with empirical observational science. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much there, Bill. You ended with 23 seconds left, so we can, well, we'll just toss that into the question and answer period.
Sure.
Erika, whenever you are ready, we are giving you 6 minutes on the clock.
Sure. I don't think I'm going to share my screen for this. I think I'm just going to talk it out because honestly, a lot of the questions that you've asked would take quite a long time to give a proper explanation for. But I'll start by saying why I'm not going to talk about the origin of life or the origin of matter. One, I'm not an atheist. I'm actually quite agnostic. I have no idea where matter came from. I'm also not an astrophysicist, so I can't even talk with regard to the Big Bang or the formation of stellar bodies with any kind of authority. I try to stay within my field because that's what I know. And I can say empirically, with regard to every observation that I've ever made, that evolutionary theory, as far as organisms changing through geologic time, is validated. The same is true with regard to the Earth being very ancient. As a mechanical engineer, I would think that you would find it very compelling that a very firm law of physics dictates that there is no way that decay can be accelerated to the extent that young Earth creationists require it to be. Now, as far as living evidence today, you're like, that's like asking for a picture to show a video. Like, why would there be any of the organisms we have today can be considered transitional? Because evolution has no final goal. Evolution is simply a mechanism by which organisms respond, or rather populations respond and adapt to the world around them. So there shouldn't be any like, look at this is a transitional form. Everything is constantly transitioning. But I suppose if you wanted a poster child, you could look to the lungfish. This organism, based off of the surroundings, based off the particular species you're looking at, some species or some individual species of that genera will spend way more time on land than others because they're responding to their environment. Now, with regard to dating, actually, I'm trying to remember what all you said because I wrote down notes as fast as I could. Let's talk about Lucy. I find it very, this is definitely my wheelhouse. I will tell you precisely why Lucy is considered transitional, because being upright walking is most certainly not the only trait that she has that makes her transitional, that makes Afarensis transitional in general. Its crania is already quite a bit above your run-of-the-mill chimpanzee. The dental formula is completely thrown to the wayside as far as relation to chimpanzees. You've got an extreme reduction of the canines. The incisors are much more prominent. The molars are starting to shift backwards more. And the diet is changing. They actually have more pitting with regard to the foods that they ate. So to limit it just to bipedality, I think is somewhat flawed. But the reason bipedality is always pointed out is because like the photo that I showed, you can't look at the pelvis of Afarensis and say it looks more like a chimp's pelvis than a human's. It's almost indistinguishable. Not just that, but the knees and the feet. I mean, we're not talking about an animal that spent some time on two legs. A bonobo in the wild spends 2% of its time walking bipedally. Lucy would have been almost obligatory with regard to her bipedalism. And we know that by looking at footprints that were made by Afarensis, found in the same layers rather as the fossilized form, and applying biomechanics to that. That's just what the data says. Now, with regard to the birds to dinosaurs, I showed many pictures of dinosaurs with very clear feather imprintations. So to say that none of those are feathers when they just are feathers, I don't really know what to say about that. I don't know about that particular example you presented. It could be the case that you're completely right with that. But I can pull my slides back up and show many more examples of birds, or rather dinosaurs with feathers. And not just that, but other traits that they share with modern birds. Mary Schweitzer, you've probably heard of her. She's the one who found the soft tissue soft tissue, quote unquote, in the dinosaur bones. And I believe it was a hadrosaur and a tyrannosaur. You know, it's very interesting. Creationists always bring her up, but they never actually bring up the other half of her results, which showed when she ran a sort of a DNA comparison on what she had. she found that there were incredible similarities to the T-Rex specimen to modern-day chickens with regard to its bones. What's a T-Rex doing with bones that mimic sort of the aeration pattern? I don't know what you would say. Dapper would know this. He knows dinosaurs, of modern chickens. And with regard to whales, the blubber thing is a non-starter, because whales today migrate from very warm waters to Arctic conditions. So the blubber's not going to be an issue. Now, I would posit, I would actually ask a sort of a question in return. Why do only a handful of extinct terrestrial mammals that lived on the coast share a single structure that no other mammals have with all modern-day cetaceans? And why do we see a clear transition through geologic time? And I'm going to ask that for all the examples that I gave, because you can point out little things like, okay, well, how does a feather evolve into a scale? This has been done by Jerry Coyne's book, Why Evolution is True. He has some excellent diagrams showing how basically a common skin cell has multiple different derivations wherein it can become a scale or a feather or what have you, even a mammary gland. So this is not stuff that hasn't been investigated, that's just being thrown out willy-nilly. Now, again, I'm not a bird person, nor am I a dinosaur person. I know most about apes and primates. So I can give you very in-depth reasons why certain things or how certain things evolved with regard to the hominids. But I'm not
30 seconds.
Oh, 30 seconds? I'm almost done. I'm just kind of rambling at this point. As, say, Dapper Dinosaur, he'd be a great person to talk to if you want to talk to about theropods and birds. But yeah, that's all I really have to say.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. Those rebuttals flew by. Very thorough. Thanks so much, guys. So at this point, we're jumping into the discussion period. So this is the portion, of course, everybody looks forward to. I know it's the portion I look forward to the most. So, but let's keep it a respectful and evenly timed discussion. And as moderators, Dapper Dino and I, we're going to remain neutral, of course, and we'll try and stay out of it as much as possible.
It's not always easy.
Right, and as Dapper Dino iterated earlier, unless things get out of control, or if any of the debaters begin to venture off topic or ignore questions, then Dapper and myself may have to jump in. But we'll try and keep it a free-flowing dialogue. I'll have 40 minutes on the clock. We can get started unless Dapper, as co-moderator, if you have anything else to say.
I just had one thing that, like Erika said, if you do want to have a dinosaur discussion, Bill, on another day, let me know.
He is the dino guy.
He's the dino man. Hence,
I have a suggestion. Bill, how would you feel about this? I know you had a list of questions for me, and if you still want me to answer those, I'm more than happy to. Would you be okay with maybe one of us asks the question, we discuss for a brief period, and then we move on to, like, the other person then gets to ask their question?
Yes, and I sincerely mean my goal is not to bully, bury, embarrass.
Yeah, of course.
We're just two slobs trying to get through life.
Sure, I agree.
Good. I like your sense of humor.
Oh, listen, I get passionate, but honestly, we're just two people having a discussion. So
exactly.
Well, whoever wants to start, whoever wants to ask the first question, I'll mute myself and have some fun. We're looking forward to it.
Yeah, Bill, you go ahead, because I just did my
You said you're agnostic, and everything I ask is with respect. What percent would you say you're leaning towards God? What percent towards atheists? Are you 1% God?
It changes. It changes all the time. It depends on what I'm currently researching. I think I used to be a very fervent theistic evolutionist, so I very much think that evolution at that time, and I still maintain, if I were to return to theism, I would maintain this to be the case as well. Evolution has very, very little to do, I think, with theism. I think that at the time when I was a theistic evolutionist, so I was a big fan of the idea that, very similar to how chemical reactions work, or physics, or natural selection itself, evolution is simply a mechanism by which life can change. It's basically a fail-safe that if you are working from a theistic standpoint, that God can put into organisms to allow them to adapt and survive and thrive.
But if you were to bet a penny, or a halfpenny if you're in England, would you bet? And again, I'm more of a goofball than anything. Would you bet a penny there is a God or there is not a God? If you had to bet a penny right now.
I would probably honestly die of old age before I could I'm so indecisive. I really can't tell you, Bill. I would love to give you an answer, but like I said, my mind changes constantly. I can think of great arguments for both sides.
Okay. What is your strongest argument that there is no God?
Oh, I would say my strongest argument, for at least within my field. I'm not going to give a cosmological argument because again, that's not where I come from. Based off of the experience that I have with regard to biology, with regard to life science in general, I would say I think that life is doing a fairly good. You can never know if someone's intervening, but if we can assume for a moment that evolution is an independent mechanism, I would say, one, things are doing quite well on their own, adapting, even though there's been 5 mass extinctions. But also, I have a couple of issues with biblical historicity, but that's kind of a conversation for another time, just because it's a little off topic, you know?
I didn't really understand your question. You say animals are taking good care of themselves, and the Bible has nothing to do with whether God exists or not.
Yeah, sure. It's
So-
just it's on creation, right? And sort of the subsequent actions.
And I believe the Bible, but if even the Bible's wrong, I believe there's a designer, 100%. But you didn't really answer my question. What's your strongest argument that there is no God?
I think that organisms, I think there's a great case to be made for abiogenesis, and I think there's a great case to be made. In fact, I think it's rather irrefutable for an ancient Earth. And if you're taking a young Earth position, I think that would violate it. Theism in general, I'm just going to say, this sounds a bit crass, but there's just no reason. There's no place really to put God that I can see, other than saying, well, he's the orchestrator, which you could say that. I'm not saying that you couldn't. I'm just saying it doesn't seem necessary at this juncture.
Okay, what's the difference then between a dead dog and a living dog?
Cerebral activity.
Why?
Because cerebral activity it's sort of the central command for the organism. So it's what determines which parts of the body do what and why and where. It's the sensory apparatus, things like that.
But why is one alive and one dead?
Well, one doesn't have any, it's none of its systems are working anymore.
I know that, but why? What turns the switch off?
Well, usually it's because something actually comes and physically halts a necessary vital system from working. So predation or things like that. But it can also happen via old age. So why do people die of old age? Well, it has quite a bit to do with the telomeres and cellular replication. Sorry. And eventually things just break down. It's just the way of things, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on who you talk to.
So if they could be repaired, it would bring the dog back to life?
Probably not. I think that
Exactly.
degradation occurs once something dies. Systems begin to break down. That's why there's such a small window in between when a human, for instance, their heart stops beating or they go brain dead or something like that, that you can actually bring them back.
Okay. Could you raise your right hand? Why'd you do that?
Not because you asked me to.
Did you have to?
No.
You chose to do it, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Where did that choice emanate from? Can my voice control your brain synapses, or did you choose to raise your hand?
No, I believe very firmly in a sort of response stimulus basis with regard to choice making in organisms. It's sort of why, depending on how cognitively complex an organism is, you may or may not be able to coerce them into doing something. But you and I are friends, so since you said raise your right hand, I thought this is probably a nice gesture, so I went ahead and did it.
Could you mail me $1 million?
I don't have that much money.
I know you get my point. I believe you have a soul. You have voluntary muscle actions in your body as a biologist and involuntary. I believe voluntary, you chose to raise your hand, was the soul that decides to do it. I hope you live to be 110 and you're healthy. You're a fine person. But after you pass, if I say, Erika, raise your right hand, would you be able to after you're dead?
No, but I would posit actually that's just because my sensory apparatus, my eyes, ears, sense of touch, etc., is no longer working. There's no way for me to even perceive that you're asking me to do that anymore. Let me ask you a counter question.
One last point. Then I believe there's more to life than biology, physics, and chemistry, that you have a soul.
You may be right, Bill. I don't know. That's the thing, and that's why when I discuss evolution, I'm very, very strict on just what empirically is happening through geologic time with organisms in general. Do they react to their environments? Can they change via genetics? Are those genetics passed on? What decides whether or not a trait makes an organism more fit? Because let's say you've got a population of ducks. And one duck is born, it's hatched, and it's just this super duck, right? Like it's got A pluses on its APGAR score, and it's just a perfect specimen. Well, none of that matters if before it's done being reared by its mother's killed by a wolf. So chance does play a role in evolution, but by and large, I think that we have sort of a self-sustaining mechanism for life, and that things can respond to their environment. And that's a very loose term, I realize. But again, I have no qualms if it turns out souls are a thing. If theism is correct, I'm down with all of that. The second I hear a super compelling argument one way or the other, that's great. My position though is that evolution, regardless of whether theism is correct or atheism is correct or whatever, evolution is just a part of life. It's just it's a tenet of biology. And that, of course, the Earth is very ancient. One, because that is indeed required for evolution, but also I would actually posit that the laws of physics have a much stronger relationship with the Earth being old as a parsimonious hypothesis than even that they do with evolution. Anyways, those are my two cents. My counter question is, and we can continue on sort of with the soul if you like, but I would also like to ask you, you mentioned when we were talking about Lucy, you were saying, well, all of these hominids can be divided into an ape kind and a human kind. Where do you draw that line and why?
Good. So you're asking me, what is my definition of kind?
No, I'm asking you which hominid is the first human kind and which one is the last ape kind.
The first human kind, I believe, was Adam, and the first ape kind was created on the 5th day, but I don't have a name for it.
Erika, maybe if you could put back up that slide that you had, that might help clarify the question a little bit, because I think there might be a little bit of a miscommunication here.
My
Okay.
answer was said half jokingly, but I didn't get any laughs. Tough crowd. Not even the
Well,
dinosaur
sorry,
laughed.
Bill.
I've been muted, though. I have had, there have been some laughs on my end. You just haven't heard them.
I know you're in the Navy. You were muted many times.
That's true.
Well, Bill, would you
love-
like me to pull up my slide, or do you get what I'm saying?
Let's see. I think what you're getting at, but I don't know what you're saying. I
Let
once
me-
did
let
a
me-
debate
let me
in New
pull it
York
up.
State, and the guy had all these skulls out, and he goes, "Put them in order." And I
Yes,
politely said,
okay.
"I'm not going to take your pop quiz."
But that's kind of but I mean, it's really more of a rhetorical question, because the gag is on the anthropological side is that it's very difficult for anthropologists to tell who's who. I mean, there's constantly debates about, all right, well, Homo habilis, you've got a 900 square centimeter brain case. For reference, humans are 1200 and chimps are 350. But you've got Homo habilis, 900 square centimeter brain case, bipedal, much smaller than humans, could use tools but not fire, was potentially capable of some cannibalistic behavior, and had much more prognathic face than, say, any of the following hominids. So some people point to Homo habilis and they say, well, habilis is the first human. That's the first member of the human kind. Because I very much doubt that you would sit here and say Neanderthals aren't human, or Homo erectus isn't human. So my question usually for creationists is, okay, well, which one's human and which one's ape? And the reason I ask that is because when you do lay out those skulls in that activity, and I realize it might have come across more condescending than helpful when this individual you previously met did it, but it's very difficult to draw that line, and I don't think anyone can, including anthropologists. That's why I asked. Did we lose him?
It does look like Bill disconnected.
Yeah, he got disconnected.
Oh shoot!
Oh, I'm sure he'll
pop back in, right?
pop back in. It happened earlier, so or I can even.
Oh, hey, right now, I guess I'm Erika.
Oh no, he's evolved.
Oh, and Erika, you're Bill.
I know.
Uh-oh. That means I have to start answering the questions for creationism.
I've got to answer the questions for. I'm a creationist now.
Oh yeah, I have to ask the
Uh-huh.
questions.
Oh, we're spicing things
You
up
two
then.
go at it.
I'm on the other team.
All right, Erika. If God is real, then how come I keep losing socks in the dryer? Checkmate, Christians.
Everything happens for a reason. Checkmate, atheists.
Oh snap!
Oh, this is getting a little bit heated, guys. We need to calm down.
Here he is. He's back.
We got him.
There we go.
We lost you, Bill.
It's as if
I
we
thought
had
I
a
lost
plan. That was the intermission.
I hope everyone does their popcorn.
I guess I had the timer paused there, so no worries. We'll get that going. So it looks like Erica's your question to Bill has to do with where can Bill draw the line on ancestry
Yes.
between, say, apes and humans,
Yes.
more or less. Okay, yeah. If you want to take as much time as you need there, Bill, to respond to Erica's question and points, and we can continue.
Okay. And again, this isn't my field, but if someone were to fund me, and I worked for the government, I know all about funding, I would hire someone that could look at the DNA, the genetics, instead of just the morphology of the skull. Because there's 8 billion humans. In the Olympics, a Chinese gymnast, female gymnast, looks a lot different than a shot putter. You could look at the skulls and say, wow, look at the difference. A punter has a skull different than a nose tackle. So there's so much variation. It's not prudent to classify a whole population. And you talked about populations evolving, not individuals, to classify a whole population on one skull. So I would say they're within the sizes of ape or within the sizes of human in a cranial capacity. And since I'm not a sexist, we can't go by cranial capacity having anything to do with intelligence, because on the average, the male cranial is larger than the female.
That's true, and it's fortunate because many of the primates today actually show significant degrees of sexual dimorphism. If you look at baboons or, for instance, gorillas, very enormous. I mean, you've got these huge hulking males and itty bitty little females. Mandrills are actually the most sexually dimorphic of the mammals. But that being said, because we have these sexually dimorphic animals today, we can come up with units of measurement. Like when we say, morphology, it's not arbitrary, right? Like it's not like, well, this one looks like it could be within this. It's morphology, but it's one via usually multiple individuals. We try not to work with just a type specimen, but occasionally it does happen. But there is indeed empiricism to it. Like I don't think it's just eyeballing. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And a hummingbird's got a tiny little brain, but that thing does things in engineering I could never do. I could never build a nest on my cable TV cable with my mouth. They wrap the nest in spider web so it can expand. I just say brain size has nothing to do with intelligence, and I give glory to God for that. But
Okay.
Next question.
Sure. Your turn.
Now, I think you said you have a background in biology, right?
Minor, but yes.
Okay, well, probably more than me. And you did throw out abiogenesis. I guess for now I can let you off the hook on the origin of matter and energy. But what is your best explanation for the origin of life, which is a key question in biology? I'm not saying that you know.
Sure.
What's
Sure.
your best explanation?
Sure. I think that the origin of life I think the warm little pond hypothesis has been thrown to the wayside, given that the Earth at that time period where we find sort of our oldest stromatolites would have been a water world. So you're probably not going to be finding many ponds. Therefore, I think that it's fair enough to go with the hydrothermal vent hypothesis, especially given hydrothermal vents can occur at multiple depths. So you could essentially get the benefits from being a shallow hydrothermal vent, right? And you get the benefits of the sunlight and perhaps the influence of lightning via I'm sure you know, like Miller and Urey's experiment, and then their subsequent experiment where they generated, golly, I think it was, don't quote me on this, I think it was like 80% of amino acids required for life. Now, obviously, they didn't form anything, right? I'm not sure how long that would even take, right? Particularly given we're working with vast time scales. So it's not like you try it once and then in a minute later you try it again. It's more like if the conditions near a hydrothermal vent, which they are conducive to amino acids and amino acid formation, you've got billions of these trials going on simultaneously. At every hydrothermal vent that's at the appropriate depth to have all of the necessary factors that generate them. So I would say that RNA world hypothesis near a hydrothermal vent is probably going to be our best bet. I'm not saying that that can't happen without the influence of someone externally. Maybe it did. I don't know. But the reason, I'm not a chemist. I work with things that are already alive. So I tend to evolution, in its conventional definition, has nothing to do with abiogenesis. So unfortunately, I can't probably give you the best answer for that. You'd want to go to a chemist or a biochemist for that.
Okay, now very important point. And again, I'll say it with respect. I asked you how you think life originated, and you talked about how you think amino acids originated. As a biologist, amino acids are not life.
Sure, but they formed the very basal building blocks of life. So
Okay.
essentially, I've heard this before by some other debaters. You don't have to show that it happened. You have to show that it's possible, and then you have to make a case that it's probable. And I believe the Miller and Urey experiments with amino acids and immense amounts of time. There's no reason to suggest that it couldn't, simply because it hasn't been done in a lab. Well, sure, it hasn't been, but we've been conducting lab experiments on it for what, not even 100 years, and life's been around for 3.8 billion. I think you've got to allow this a little bit of nuance.
Well, we got to be practical. If I gave you 100 trillion amino acids, would they form peptide bonds?
I have no idea.
Proteins, or would they fall back into their base elements? What do we observe over and over and over again?
I have no idea, Bill. I'm not a biochemist.
Okay. Well, what would your guess be? You're a very smart person that you know biology. Are they going to form peptide bonds and proteins or break apart?
Well, let me ask you for a little
Go
bit
ahead,
more
answer my
information.
question, please.
But I can't without more information.
Well, what's your best guess?
I was going to say, what were the conditions that they were under?
Any condition you want.
Can I invoke changing conditions?
Any condition you want. Are they going to form proteins or break down to their?
I would argue that at some point, given unlimited time and trillions, as you say, as well
You
as
can't have unlimited. It's got to be finite. I'll give you 1 trillion years.
Oh, yes, absolutely. 1 trillion years? Yes.
1 trillion years. Okay, yeah. What's going to happen?
Well, eventually, I'm not sure what the exact stepwise function is, but I believe after peptide bonds, right, then you start to get strands of RNA. And RNA, because of the way that they're composed, they tend, not always, but they tend to self-organize when they're in close proximity to one another.
Well, amino acids form proteins, not RNA.
That's true.
It's not a nucleic acid. Well, what's going to happen, it's called the law of mass action. They're going to go to a higher entropy state. They're going to break down. And even if the amino acids made a protein, is a protein life? No. Is DNA life? No. A dead dog. So a dead dog's not even life. You see what I'm getting at? And so
I do.
let me finish. I say it respectfully. People talk about how did life originate? Well, they could make amino acids. Well, I'm asking how you make a living thing, not amino acids. You follow me? It's a Grand Canyon that you just can't jump across.
Bill, I'm with you. But again, I'm certain. Let's take evolution for an example. Like evolution in a conventional sense, a great many people do not understand. I'm not referring to anybody here necessarily. I'm just saying a great many people do not understand precisely how natural selection and the basic tenets of evolutionary theory actually work. Now, I've been informed on RNA World like 3 years ago. But abiogenesis isn't my passion because it's not evolution. It's the origin of life. So while I could sit here and flounder all day to try to tell you the step-by-step process of how life is supposed to have emerged, that's, again, not my field. I can tell you all about the evolution of life once it's present. But I also don't have a problem with abiogenesis being spurred by something. That's not something that I have an issue with. What I'm arguing is that life as it is now, one, is very old, and two, has been changing over time, right? That's what I will argue because that's what I believe is empirical and provable to like as far a degree as you can do that. So in return, first I need to ask, are you a young Earth creationist?
I'm old Earth. I think it's 6,000 years old. That's a long time.
So young Earth creationist.
Thank you very much. Okay. Come on, Dino, give me a drum roll. So you have short arms.
So let me ask you then, Bill, how do you reckon with basically the very fundamental law of radioactive decay?
Okay, well, there's many, let's say, tools to estimate how old the Earth is. Agree? There's not just one.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
There's only one thing I know, Erica, and the Earth is at least 59 years old. That's what I know. Okay?
Sure.
And it's supposed to be another joke. Where's my drum roll, Dino? Okay. Now,
You can see my room. I don't have drums.
okay. Now,
I have been laughing, Bill. I've just been on mute.
That
Thank you,
excuse is being thrown around a lot.
Okay. I have a whole bunch of slides on the age of the Earth. My strongest argument, with an open mind, do you really think a fossil in a sedimentary rock could survive 3.5 billion years of abuse without eroding?
100%, mostly because the way that sort of subduction works is rock is frequently shoved underneath other rock and covered by new rock, only to then be pushed up once again and finally exposed to the elements. Now that's not quite my question, though. So the law of radioactive decay is a I mean, you're a mechanical engineer. You know math way better than I do. It's like a very simple equation that I can pull up again. It's plug and chug. And no matter which way you do it, you could, like you said, there are numerous ways to date a rock. You can use multiple methods of radiometric dating and cross-corroborate them with one another. And still, every single time, we get that the Earth is at the very least 3.5 billion years old. So how are you as a creationist going to get around that? Because it's just math.
Are you willing to hang your hat to saying there's no dating methods that contradict each other when they date rocks and bones, or bones?
I am willing to say that I'm not a geologist, but I'm fairly well versed on it, and I've talked to quite a few geologists. The accuracy of radiometric dating just with one method is impeccably accurate. I would say, based off of the number of times we radiometrically date rock for finding oil, for finding natural gas, whatever, it's at least upwards of 90%. But you have to keep in mind, we're not checking just once. We're checking over and over and over again because, one, it's fundamental for our economy to know where the black shale is, where is the natural oil, where, to put in our cars. So this kind of dating has application to it, and it's usually very, very right. So my question, again, to contra that, are you going to say it's coincidence that every single time we check it, we get super old ages?
I am willing to say to you, I have slides that I could pull up where dates have contradicted, like the lava dome at Mount St. Helens. They had dates that contradict each other by hundreds of millions of years.
Would you like me to answer that for you? Because I can. I know that one.
They dated moon rock.
Let's let Bill give a chance to answer.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bill. I interrupted.
They dated moon rocks. Some of the dates were off by 1 billion years, depending on the sample that they took and the method. Radiometric dating measures what? Does it measure the age?
Or are you asking? It measures the ratio of parent to daughter isotopes of a given element.
It measures the chemistry. So if the chemistry is off, that would throw your date off.
I agree.
And that happens all the time, Erica. More than half the dates, they state, that's their own words, they have to reject because of contamination.
Oh, I would, first of all, I would 100% need a source on that. But there's an excellent book I would ask you to check out. It's by 2 Christian geologists. It's called The Bible, Rocks, and Time. And it has about 150 pages in it just on radiometric dating and all of the different methods that cross-corroborate one another. And the statistic that I got from them was hundreds of thousands of rocks are dated every year. And the error bars for that, it's like 2 to 3%. So, and I'm not saying that are wrong. I'm saying the years are off, but depending on a given age, it's usually a percentage of the age that they're measuring, but are off by 2 to 3%. And that's when they recheck. So this is something that is mathematical. It's like you said, it's just chemistry.
You can't calibrate it. Okay, suppose you and I were in London and we saw a car whizzing by. And I said, hey, that car, let's say United States. I don't know England too well. We're hanging out and we see a car whiz by, 50 miles per hour going south. And I say, Erica, that car was in Seattle 3 weeks ago. What would you say?
You said we're in London?
No, we're in Arizona, let's say.
And you said it was in California?
Seattle.
Oh, Seattle. I would say, how do you know that?
Well, I said, well, Erika, it's going south at 50 miles per hour. So if we extrapolate to that, that's where it began.
Okay. I would say, how do you know it's been heading in a straight line?
I don't. I'm just assuming it is.
Oh, well, then I would say that that's not an accurate means to measure it, but that's not how radiometric dating works.
Radiometric dating deals in the presence. You are measuring what?
You're right.
The chemistry.
Yes, you are. But the thing is that there has been to date zero goose egg violation of how an unstable isotope decays into its parent or decays into its daughter status. That there is no way. I mean, creationists have actually, like, they actually sent a team out. They're RATE, you probably heard of them, but they actually sent a team out with very good funding and said, you guys go figure out how radiometric dating is flawed. And they couldn't do it, Bill. They couldn't. They actually had to release a statement where John Woodmrap, famous creationist, he's the guy who talks about the bristlecone pines all the time, and he had to come out and say, without allowing for exotic solutions, there is no way to accelerate decay or to explain the dates that we have today. That's paraphrasing. I gave the real quote in my presentation. But
Right.
but the point is that they had creationist geologists on this. Andrew Snelling was on the case. So it's like, if these guys can't come up with it, with an exotic solution, then you're going to have to say, well, maybe it was a miracle, but then that's not science.
Well, how did they come up with 5 different dates for moon rocks, 5 different dates for the lava dome of Mount St. Helens? They're measuring the chemistry. I'm not disputing radiometric decay. It's the present, how much is there.
Correct, which is why you use multiple methods. That's why you can compare it with isochron, which, sorry, I just kicked my table. You can compare it with isochron, which doesn't even have to presume the amount of parent present at the beginning. That's how accurate we're getting with these things. These dates are really important because, these methods are really important because, like I said, they fuel our economy. I mean, you've got the big guys, you've got like Exxon who cares about this. So they have to be accurate. And essentially, yes, it's chemistry, but it's also physics. So if you know that, let's say rubidium strontium, it's got a half-life of
That's my question
days.
about the different dates. I say there's, okay, and I don't mean to be rude or cut you off.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I get it.
You say there's corroboration. Let's call the whole thing off. You see, sure. I could go back and forth and say, look, they got all kinds of different dates for this moon rock or the lava dome at Mount St. Helens. And you could say, no, there's corroboration.
Right. And I would say that considering how often it works for finding natural gas and oil and all, I mean, fossils, that's great. That's what I care about. But that's not what the big guys care about. They care about finding the economically viable things that geology has to do with. So I would say, first of all, with Mount St. Helens, I can answer that very easily. You can't date rock that has only been around for under, I think usually it's under like, I want to say like 5,000 to 10,000 years is the range, because not enough of it has decayed to actually give a measurement. So you get wonky measurements. That's why when you date things with known age, it doesn't work out. I mean, again, this is covered in this book. These guys are like geologists, not like me. So okay. I'm sort of parroting them. So you'll have to take it up with them if you don't like, or if you disagree rather with that statement. But as far as the moon rocks, I'll need to look into that because I haven't actually heard that one before. The Mount St. Helens one, you can't date Mount St. Helens rocks, and any geologist worth their salt knows
the laboratories did. They provided dates. I'll send you the reference. Like to see it.
Please do. I mean, I would be interested. Maybe it was, I mean, Mount St. Helens occurred in the 80s, so it could be that it was prior to knowing that totally messes up the calibration. I mean, again, if there weren't, oh, sorry, go ahead.
It's not empirical.
No, it absolutely
chemistry. Is. Once again, I don't know if I'm getting through. They're measuring the chemistry, but you want to make all these assumptions of how it got there. They sent them the lava dome, and they came back with a date.
Right, so, but the thing is, oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I think right now we're basically just getting to my sources say X, my sources say Y, and you don't have each other's sources. So maybe rather than continuing on with this, where I think we're at an impasse, we redirect back towards biology, maybe.
Yeah, sure. That's fair enough. Okay, I asked that question. Your turn, Bill.
All right. I love this question, and I hope you do too. How does a beaver know how to build a dam? A hummingbird know how to build a nest, and how does a whale know to migrate south in January?
Oh,
I
those
know
are all.
instinct, but my question is, what is instinct?
Oh, sure. I mean, that's all excellent questions, or those are all excellent questions, rather. Most of instinct, and I'm not going to say all, but again, I work with primates, so most of instinct is taught. So basically, that's why we have maternal care in actually all three of the species you listed. Less so with hummingbirds, but certainly beavers, certainly whales. Most of the organisms that we see complex social behavior in, or like cognition, etc., they usually have high parental care. Or alternatively, they're eusocial animals. So that's why like bees and ants and wasps, right? They live in huge colonies and they pick up on one another's pheromones and react accordingly. That's just chemistry. But with regard to migration, well, I mean, whales are, first of all, cetaceans are incredibly intelligent. If you have and they live for a very long time. So if you have a baby whose mama is 50 years old, and they've lived with them for 6 years. They're still, dependent on mom. And every year when the water starts to get cold, they all swim in a certain direction. Okay, cool. That's great. Well, when that baby reaches 10 years and mom's not around anymore, it's still following the pod, and then eventually it's going to be one of the older ones, and it's doing it because that's what it learned to do. Alternatively, you can also make the argument that they are incredibly good at sensing the temperature of the water around them, similar to how we're good at sensing the air around us, and we can know when we're cold or when we're hot or whatever. That's when you swim the warmer waters, because you remember, because these guys have huge brains, that 2 years ago when you got cold, the whole group went in that direction. I mean, it's social learning, kind of on a basal level, but hummingbirds, same thing. You have these animals that live with their parents for not nearly as much as the others, granted. And hummingbird nests also aren't nearly as complex as, say, some of the birds of paradise. They have like really cool nests that are very elaborate. And I'm not an ornithologist, so I guess I can't explain precisely why those birds of paradise build those very specific nests. But a lot of it, again, is parental care. The same with beavers and dams. It likely started when one beaver was in a small creek. I mean, this is totally speculative. I'm not saying this is how it happened. Put a couple of logs in front of it, because mammals are quite intelligent. And they often do weird things. You have dogs, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it stopped up the dam. And all of a sudden, there's all of these resources that are unable to pass, fish pooling and things like that. And all of a sudden you're like, well, this is pretty useful. You have some offspring. They also live in that area. They see you reinforcing the dam, because guess what? It's working. So my answer is, a lot of that is social learning. There are exceptions, and I'm sure you can provide some.
And I say this politely, I'm sure there's many, many exceptions where beavers were never taught how to build a dam. Hummingbirds were not taught how to build a nest.
Their parents didn't teach them?
Absolutely not. I've studied instinct a little bit. And you have a dog.
Wait.
You put in. Go ahead.
Sorry, beavers are mammals. Most mammals, particularly muscelids, which I believe beavers are muscelids, they have a decent amount of parental care. And they live in decent groups, decent sized groups as well. I would be very surprised if offspring did not learn from their parent. That's a pretty mammalian trait. That's why we lactate, right?
But they've separated them, and they've seen them build dams. They've seen birds migrate without the assistance of their parents. You've heard of the bristle-thighed curlew? It's a bird.
No, I don't know that.
And again, it's not a one-upmanship. The bristle-thighed curlew, they hatch the eggs in Alaska. The moms and dads help them get a little bit strong. But before they can fly, they go to the Fiji Islands, about 7,000 miles away, which requires about 10 days of flying over water nonstop. The parents leave before the offspring can fly, and they find them 7,000 miles away, navigating over water at night. How in the world do they have the information to do that?
Well, I mean, I think it's fair enough to say, how do penguins recognize each other? And the answer is because they don't operate under the same sensory cap that we do. I mean, take dogs, for instance. Their sense of smell is millions of times greater than us. So they can pick up on signals and senses that we have no idea are there. I would argue that very similar to how electric eels are capable of, or not electric eels, sorry, although they might be able to as well. Sharks find prey picking up on electric currents. A great many animals are capable of picking up on sort of sensory inputs from the environments around them that we can't. We can with instrumentation, which is why, and I don't know that this is the case, but there have been several propositions for how birds migrate and sort of find their way, that are indeed empirically grounded. I don't know them because I'm not an ornithologist, but I would say to appeal, I guess, to a design for that, I don't know that that's viable. For me, that's not a viable explanation. I mean,
Okay, can I cut you off a little bit? You're on a good roll, but
yeah,
let's
sure.
talk about our favorite animal, the dog. I'm not putting words in your mouth, am I?
No, please. I love dogs.
Me too. Okay, I do too. The dog nose is hardware. Your dog, my dog, can smell things amazingly. The software is to decide whether to eat it or not. And I study my dog. I'll put things that I know it has never smelt in its whole life, and it'll instantly either eat it or not eat it. I believe, Erika, and you can disagree with me, that every animal, including humans, have imputed information. Beavers have brains with information imputed, I believe, from a supernatural source, because information is not material, to build a dam, different sized creeks, different building materials, to build a nest. The whale has the hardware to navigate, but it needs the software on when to go and what direction. Me and you could be in a dark ocean. We don't know northeast, south, and west. So I believe that your beloved dog has the information to know what is food and what is not food. That's the software. And that's like your soul. Your soul is the software. Your hardware was your hand that you raised earlier, but the software was you deciding to do that. And I believe that's a powerful argument for the existence of a God.
So, and that might be the case. I mean, the soul thing might be a case. I think connecting it to this is a little unfounded, though, and for one reason only. In science, we seek parsimony. So you're a mechanical engineer, you know this. You try to find the best possible explanation that fits with the data that we see. I would greatly challenge you to find an organism that is doing what you say, reacting to these innate instincts, that is not receiving external stimulus. Because very frequently there is an external stimulus, but we can't pick up on it with basic senses. That's when we cart out the tech stuff, right? And based on that, right, you might say, okay, well, maybe there is an external stimulus, but how do they know to pick up on it? How do they know what to do with those stimuli? And I would say, well, one, that's where ethology comes in. That's studying animal behavior and how they pass things on to one another. Two, I would point out that most animals that have very complicated, that pick up on these kinds of sensory things and are capable of interpreting them to a complicated degree based off of what we would think from an anthropologic perspective, they're social living animals. So there's a great chance that, one, it's response stimulus, but two, it's also socially learned. And three, I would point out that there's no empirical way to measure that something is innate, right? I mean, there are innate instincts. Human babies, they when they're crawling, right? Yeah, they know to avoid falling, like heights, right? They'll steer clear of, if you put them on plexiglass, and half of the plexiglass is looks like it has something underneath it, and the other half looks like it's falling. They know not to go over there, right? I would argue.
Let me ask you about babies real quick.
Oh, sure.
And again, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, it's okay. I know. It's a passionate discussion.
Fun trivia. Well, no, I won't make it a trivia question. About 95% of babies in the womb right before birth turn to get their head to come out first. Okay. In my study of instinct, that is explained as instinct, information. Something is telling that baby, hey, get that big old head facing south.
So wait.
Nobody taught it.
Pardon me?
Nobody taught the baby, hey,
right.
You're about to be born, turn your head to the south. You know what I mean?
And that would fall under response stimulus, because I would bet, I don't know this for sure, because I obviously don't have the source or the claim in front of me, but I would bet that babies can pick up on the squeezing of the womb as it's getting ready to go into contractions. And that's what causes it to move to face south. Not that it's physically moving it, but that the baby knows to start maneuvering itself. It's a response stimulus. It could be that that's genetically coded, because there is behavior that is genetically coded into many, many animals. And that's because it was a survival advantage.
Wait, real quick. I believe there could be stimulus. Is that hardware or software when it feels the contractions? Is that hardware or software?
I believe that I would wager that you would categorize it as software.
No. If you're, I'll say someone else. If someone's a baby in the womb, they feel contraction. That's hardware. It's feeling the pressure on it. The software is to say, I got to spin around. You follow me?
No, I'm with you, but I don't understand why you think why you're proposing rather that software is not just genetics. Like obviously organisms, like let's say you're a monkey, let's say you're a capuchin monkey, you live in South America. What you really want to avoid.
Changing the subject.
No,
It's
it
back
has
to
to,
the
do with what you're talking about.
The baby could feel it and say, gosh, I hate that squeezing. But it says, no, I don't hate that squeezing. I'm going to get my head facing south.
Right, but Bill, I'm making this comparison. If you have a capuchin that's scared of monkeys innately, as they are, the baby ones don't even have to be exposed to their parent before they shy away from long squiggly things, because certain response stimulus are genetic, then it's going to be more likely to survive because it's not going to go near snakes. It's the same situation with babies. Babies that are breech are less likely to be born successfully. So those ones that have that instinct that you're referring to, which I would propose is inherently genetic as it is with the capuchins, then it knows it's going to have a greater chance of surviving. So yes, it might be that it's instinct, but instinct isn't non-empirical. It's something that you can measure in science, and very frequently you can trace it to specific genes, particularly like that are related to development, right? Because obviously these instincts aren't going to be useful when you're in the womb, except in that case, but for capuchins, not so much.
So it's got a gene that says when you feel this type of pressure, it turns. Again, it goes back to you raising your hand. I believe information, like instinct, is immaterial and has to be imputed. A father beaver, let's imagine you're a mother beaver and you're going to teach your kids how to build the dam. And I wasn't the best, but I was an engineer. There's a million varying conditions, million different design possibilities. The mom didn't say, hey, if the waters go in at 8 feet per second, you got to do this. You got to get this size rock. No, you knucklehead, not that size. You see where I'm getting at?
I do, but I would compare it to apes and tool use. I mean, you don't have to teach a chimpanzee to use a tool. You can, it's a lot more efficient. But they can figure it out themselves. They can figure out a vast majority in lab conditions, particularly. So a lot of it has to do with cognition. But I think what you're missing here is that it's not any one thing of these things that I've mentioned. Very frequently, it's a combination. It's response stimulus, it's cognitive ability, it's social learning, it's genetics, and all of these combine to create a vast myriad of social systems and very innovative strategies for survival. And you can ask a lot of geneticists who do, or usually ethologists too, but for specific examples, and they'll fire them out at you. I work, again, I'll monologue if you don't stop me. So go ahead.
Yeah, it's okay. So if you were to fill in the blank, you would say instinct is materialistic, fully materialistic.
I would say instinct is naturalistic. Yes, I would say that it is capable of evolving and has indeed evolved.
Well, they do have beavers that have never seen information from their parents, and you can look it up. Birds that migrate, the bristle-thighed curlew. I don't know how DNA could say, hey, bristle-thighed curlew, you got to leave at this time in this direction, and they find their parents 7,000 miles away over the water. Amazing information, I believe, and that's imputed.
Let me make a bit of a comparison. So my dad loves medicine. He's a doctor. That's like his thing. He's very passionate about it, and he enjoys learning about it in his free time as well. I also enjoy biology and medicine, not specifically medicine, but biology in general. As very frequently children have the same in sort of hobbies as their parents. Now you could argue that that's nurture, and I bet a lot of it is, but that kind of bolsters my hypothesis here. But some of it is nature as well. What people are interested in, like for instance, there was a fascinating study done with human babies that was compared to baby monkeys on when they're infants, what kind of toys they prefer based off of their sex. Males were more likely to pick trucks, things with wheels. Females were more likely to pick dolls than males were, but both were equally as likely to play with the stuffed animal. And females were more likely than males to enjoy a toy outside of their sex. No one taught them that. Those preferences those preferences are innate, but they're also genetic. You see what I mean? Because let's say, so for instance, my grandmother is highly, she's highly feminine. She really enjoys classically feminine things. That's totally cool, whatever. My mom, not so much. She's not that into that stuff. I'm much more like my mom in that fashion. And I guarantee you, if I have children, they'll probably fall in the similar line. They'll be more likely to fall in line with myself and my mother than my grandmother, just based off of how behavior is kind of parceled out with regard to genetics. But it could be they're more like my grandmother. Are you telling me you think that I just want to be clear about this, that you don't think behavior can be transmitted genetically?
Of course, I have 3 kids, but they're all very different.
Sure, they probably had different DNA scrambles between you and your wife.
But absolutely. But I would encourage you to think deeper about instinct. The baby turning in the womb, 95% do it. And I believe that is instinct. Bees are not taught how to build a hive. They're in the dark. The second they're born, they start building these perfect hexagons. Now, the millennials of today are going to just say, I'm not going to work that hard. They work themselves to death, which is counterproductive to the individual, good for the population. I believe they have instinct, and every animal has it. Your dog, when you were in your mom's womb, you had instinct, and I believe that's imputed information that is immaterial.
I agree.
I just wanted to let you guys know we got about 3 minutes left in the discussion portion.
Sure.
So continue on. I'll give you another 30-second warning before we end it up, and then we'll go into the concluding statements. Go ahead.
Sure. I would say that we both agree that instinct is a thing, and we both agree that organisms are capable of it. I bet the vast majority of bees prior to this individual bee that we're talking about also knew how to build a hive. I bet you, if you go far back enough, you'll find a split where some were more capable of building a hive than others. Maybe they all built hives, but some were worse and some were better, as individual variation does exist today. But natural selection weeds those bees out now because we've established this norm for the species that works really well. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I would suggest that instinct is absolutely present. I just think that it's naturalistic, and I would suggest, sort of as a counter suggestion, that you look into the genetics of it, because it does exist. Like there's codes for propensities for certain behaviors. It's not necessarily that it's going to happen. It's just like you might be more predisposed to do something than someone else. And I think we'll just have to agree to disagree. I don't think that there's an empirical reason to categorize instinct as anything supernatural.
The next time you give your dog food, think of me.
I will.
Hold a rock in your right hand and hold a food it's never had before and it's left, and your doggy's going to know which one to go.
I've got 2 golden retrievers. It doesn't matter if it's poison; they'll probably eat it.
It won't.
So, yeah, they're sweet, but they're not very intelligent. They're not cognitively capable. They're just very nice animals.
Well, you got to get mutts. Mutts are superior than inbreds.
That's actually true. I would agree with that. They get less disease. They've got some excellent qualities. I can't resist them. But my parents got them, but I also can't. I love Goldens. I think they've got such sweet personalities.
We're a mutt family. They live longer too.
That's true. They do. On average, they do.
15 years. All right.
I didn't know it was that high.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what else could we fit into this very small period of time?
Well, we've got about 1 minute left. If you guys wanted to end it on a good note such as that, we can jump into the concluding statements, because I will say we got a lot of really, really good questions. The audience is having a blast. It's been a really, really good turnout. So if we want to get through the concluding statements, we can jump into a question and answer period.
Oh, that's perfect. That'll work for me.
All right, I guess I go first.
Yes, we can let you go first, Bill, since you started us off. We've got a max 5-minute concluding statement here from the both of you. So we can start with you, Bill, whenever you're ready. We won't start on your first word. We'll start when you're good to go.
Oh, how long do I have?
We got 5 minutes.
Okay, great. Well, first, it was delightful to talk to you. I love your energy. I love your zeal for knowledge. Creation versus evolution. I believe creation is much stronger than the case of evolution. One reason, design. I believe the human body is a design. The circulatory system's a design. The heart's a design. The cells are a design. The molecules, the atoms, every single atom in the universe, I believe, is a result of design. That requires a designer. The alternative is electrons happen by chance, protons happen by chance, neutrons, they came together, they made atoms, they made molecules, they made cells, they made hearts, they made people, and then they had to have that spark of life. The first law of thermodynamics, I respect that Erika didn't want to talk about that, but I think she knows it better than she let on. First law of thermodynamics teaches matter and energy is neither created nor destroyed. Translation, matter and energy don't poof from nothing. by natural means. That doesn't prove God that exists, but it's overwhelming evidence against a naturalistic atheist belief that matter and energy just poofed. And then it's got to become organized, which contradicts the second law of thermodynamics, that chaos does not become order. I know Erika understands the law of biogenesis. If I was an atheist, I would run from the law of biogenesis. Life only comes from life. It's the cell theory. It's the law of biogenesis. Let's suppose life does originate from non-life by chance. It's got to be able to metabolize. It's got to be able to reproduce. To an atheist, and I'm not calling Erika an atheist, metabolism happened by chance. Transportation happened by chance. Reproduction happened by chance. Life had to happen by chance. Males and females, sexual reproduction, a field that atheists ignore. I only saw one article in all my years that addressed male-female reproduction. It was by Lynn Margolis, and she said cannibalism is how we got out of the diploid state in chromosomes. Genetics. Genetics, to me, is a nightmare for an atheist or an evolutionist. Once again, 8 billion people. This is a big sample. All human parents, human grandparents. The mitochondrial DNA all teach. Everyone has the same female ancestor, and it was a human. It's mitochondrial Eve. The evolutionist has to do a lot of contorting to get around that. We have 1 million apes. They're making nothing but apes. 0 transitional forms, and the evolutionists themselves admit to that. Fossils. There are trillions of fossils. Tens of millions have been categorized. We see living fossils. I would just like if Erika addresses living fossils, perhaps. To me, that's a nightmare. There's thousands of them. I had to delete many of them so I could get my 12 minutes in. But to me, living fossils are a nightmare for the atheist. 7 more reasons to believe in God. You're going to love this one. Check that out. Beauty. Why in the world is there beautiful butterflies? That's art. Art requires an artist. I believe every atom on these butterflies is the result of an artist designing it and planning it. I don't believe chance mutation over millions of years could make these. Not only is the artwork different, look at the wings. The design of the wings are different. Aerodynamic diversity, fantastic, beautiful design. 7 more reasons. My favorite one is B, transparent wings. Beauty and art requires an artist. Wings require an aeronautical engineer. I believe the God of the Bible are all of these things. One more thing, Erika, let's talk about your dog. I never met your beautiful golden retrievers, but I propose every single hair on your dog is perfect. Every single hair on your golden retrievers either that got there by design or chance. Every hair on your dog requires DNA to program the location, the diameter, the length, the color, the material. Every hair on every dog requires genetic DNA information. I believe the God of the Bible is so big, he has designed every hair on your dog specifically. The hair on your dog's ear is different than the hair on your dog's back. That requires DNA, that requires information.
You've got 15 seconds, Bill.
Okay, and this is a planet of extinction. This is not a planet of evolution. We see death. We see animals going extinct. We do not observe bacteria evolving into blue whales. This planet is a planet where we are running out of beautiful animals, and it's death and extinction. And it was an honor to be on the debate and a pleasure to meet you, Erika.
Thank you, Bill.
Just in time, Bill. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Erika. Your 5-minute concluding statement can start whenever you're ready.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't have a great too many things to say. I'll quickly address some of the things that Bill said. There are hundreds of transitional forms. I would suggest anybody to go back and pause my presentation at any of the sections where I was talking about them and really think about the just how impactful it is that we find these guys very frequently in different geologic layers in order of emergence based off of modern animals, which is fascinating stuff. You're absolutely right. This is a world of extinction. I've never met a creationist capable of explaining the pulses of the 5 great pulses of extinction that we find, with both incredible anoxia found in the rocks, dry volcanic ash beds, which would have occurred. I suppose that it would have occurred during Noah's flood, but my question is, why is it dry? There's a lot of things that we could go over there. Living fossils. Coelacanth today is a great example of a living fossil, but it looks immensely different from the fossil coelacanths. It's still a coelacanth, but that doesn't mean that it's the same kind. Stasis doesn't mean identical. Stasis means, on the whole, there hasn't been pressure to force something to change. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's like the motto of natural selection. If it works within the environment, why change? That's like a very fundamental aspect of evolution. Design and beauty. Well, if evolutionary theory is correct, then we would have evolved to value beauty, because beauty very frequently correlates with health. Particularly in animals that are living in the wild. It shows that you've got enough resources to feed yourself, etc. With regard to butterflies and things like that, a lot of that has to do with first, and particularly birds, sexual selection. As far as I really feel like a lot of Christians that I have a conversation with underestimate the power of mutation and selection and time, which is why I harp so frequently on sort of bits and pieces with regard to how old the Earth is. I think genetics. I think to say that genetics is bad for atheism, I can't speak for atheism, but with regard to evolution, it's a godsend. The modern synthesis was absolutely impeccable. It's in the same way that we know that I'm related to my mother by looking at our genomes, you can know that how close or how far you are to other organisms. And that's the same logic, and that's they both hold up in court. So they do have application, very similar to radiometric dating, which on the whole, I'm sure there are mistakes. There are mistakes in every aspect of science, but on the whole, if something works, I think it's the most parsimonious explanation. What else do we have here? Not too much. I would again.
Dog hair.
Pardon me?
Dog hair.
Oh, dog hair. Yes, I love my dogs. But every one of my dog's hairs isn't necessarily perfect. They tend to get not necessarily mange, but sometimes they get hot spots, so they don't like that. I wish every hair on them was perfect and didn't irritate them sometimes. But the hot spots are fairly easy to treat. I would also emphasize that dogs are a great example of evolution because it's artificial selection. Yes, dogs can interbreed, but reproductive isolation is one of the means by which we examine whether speciation has occurred or not. And I very much doubt that a Great Dane and a Chihuahua could interbreed without the influence of humans. So the question is, have they speciated? Well, I don't know. The definition of species is very hard to define because it doesn't exist in nature. Life is a gradient, and that's why everything is constantly transitioning and adapting to its environment to the best of its abilities. This is observable. We see it every day. And I think a lot of it comes down to just appreciating the data that we have. And that's all I have to say. I had a great time.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for that, Erika. Yes, it was a really good debate, really engaging. Like I said before, the audience had a blast. But you know what? Thanks to the debaters for doing it, because we wouldn't have had this debate if it wasn't for you guys. So we've got a really exciting Q&A here as well. We're going to do 30 minutes. And we've got a lot of good questions to cover. So if we don't get to your question within the 30 minutes, I'm sure it's going to fly by. I apologize. What we can do during this portion is allow for a brief response or even a slight back and forth from the other debater. But Dapper Dino and myself may have to jump in when necessary just to move forward to the next question. So let's have fun. Dapper Dino's got the questions all compiled here.
Oh, yes.
So, did you want me to read the first one there, Dapper?
Yeah, I'll post them in the internal chat in pairs, and you can grab the first one, and I'll grab the second one. I'm not planning to go strictly in the order they were asked, just so that we can make sure that both debaters get a good mix.
Great idea.
Yeah, because they came in chunks. There's a whole bunch for Erika, then a bunch for Bill, so I want to keep it a little bit mixed a little bit. So
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, we'll do that then. So the first question is from Landon Freeman. Thanks for the question. He says, my first question for Erika, what evidence would convince you that life was designed? Take your time.
Oh man, that is a good question. I think that design and evolution aren't necessarily like divorced concepts is sort of the first thing that I would say. I mean, from a colloquial standpoint, organisms are designed for their environment and in that they tend to thrive in them until the environment changes and then everything goes haywire or pathogen is introduced, aka us right now. But I think as far as convincing me that life is de facto designed and evolution isn't true, it would be a little bit difficult to do that at this point, just because there are many aspects that I would see make design a bit difficult. For instance, the classic examples, the laryngeal nerve in the giraffe, right? Which is thrown around a lot. But I would say that designing by the use of evolution, well, sure. I mean, for that, you would just have to present an excellent case for theism. And then I would be like, okay, well, I'm a theist. I think evolution is what God used to design everything here. And that these things are like that because evolution, like any other process, is a mechanism. And it's perfect in that it keeps life going. I mean, we've had 5 mass extinctions and we're still hanging out. This next one's trying really hard, though, this pandemic.